You're listening to
Sticky Note Conversations with Erika Washington. Way below acceptable. Way below acceptable.
On this week's episode, why you and why now?
I just am so sick of going to the legislature and waiting for change. Americans are standing up and asking for better.
Way below acceptable.
Hey there, Sticky Note listeners. It's your host, Erika Washington. I'm super excited for today's show. As many of you know, we are in the midst of the midterm primary season. You can turn your ballot in by mail, drop it off in person, or vote the old-fashioned way on June 9th. Today, we have the chair of the Washoe County Commission, who's also running for governor. And if you may remember, Nevada Attorney General Aaron Ford, who's also been on the show, is also running for governor. He was not able to make it for an updated conversation. However, the older conversation that you can find streaming on Spotify, Apple, et al. Is a great conversation, and it will really help you get to know the candidate that is running for governor. It's extremely important that everyone makes their voice heard. And that is exactly what Alexis Hill wants to do. I think you'll enjoy today's conversation as much as I did, but I also think you'll learn something. Thanks for listening. Hey there, Sticky Note listeners. This is your host, Erika Washington, and I'm really excited to welcome Alexis Hill to Sticky Note Conversations. It's her very first appearance, hopefully not her last. She is currently the a county commissioner in Washoe County up north in Reno, or the Reno area, I should say, because up north is more than Reno. But also she is running to be your next governor for the state of Nevada. So we're in the midst of the primaries as we are talking now. And so I wanted to have an opportunity for folks to hear from her and us to ask some questions and to get to know who Alexis Hill is and why the heck she wants to be a governor. So welcome, Alexis, to Sticky Note Conversations.
Thank you for having me, Erika. It's a joy.
I am happy to have you. And so I'm so glad we had an opportunity to do a little bit of a pre-conversation about a week ago so I could learn a little bit more about you and take a little bit of notes to start. But before we dive into all of that, the first question I like to ask everyone is, who are you? We've given a little bit of your titles and the such, but when you walk into a room, who is Alexis Hill?
I love that question. I would say I'm a mom first. I have a 4-year-old and now I have a 2-year-old foster daughter. And I also feel like I'm a public servant second. So I'm really proud of being a public servant for my community my entire career. I've worked at the city of Sparks, at the city of Reno. I've worked in nonprofits to really build up my community. And then as a county commissioner, I'm very proud of that work that I've been able to do for our state. And so that's how I enter the room. I feel like I'm nurturing my kids and hopefully nurturing my community.
And how long have you been involved in politics? What was your first soiree, or how did you get caught up in the whole idea of being a public servant, but more so wanting to run for an office?
I think I never thought I'd run for office because for some reason I think I really reduced my path of what I could do. And I think women do that a lot. And I thought, I'm going to work at the city of Reno for 30 years and I'm going to become the city manager. And that still is very ambitious and a great goal. But I hadn't imagined running for office, even though it was in my blood. My dad ran for school board and I would knock doors with him and we'd pound signs into the side of the road. I remember vividly doing that kind of thing. And he was also on the Board of Regents because he believed in education. That was his main driver and why he was successful. But I just thought, I'm going to be working for my local community. And the reason I got caught up in that is I didn't have a sidewalk walking to school, didn't like that. I went to the city council, and this is when I was a kid, and asked for a sidewalk. They were very nice to me, but no sidewalk appeared. And I realized that, local government actually can do wonderful things for you, or they can ignore you. And I went and pursued a degree in political science because of it, and pursued a master's degree in public administration because I just want to make my community better. And I ran for county commission because I started to see, working at the city of Sparks and the city of Reno, oh my gosh, these elected officials are human, just like me. They are sometimes driven by the right things and sometimes driven by things that I would disagree with, and maybe making decisions that aren't for the long-term quality of life for a community and more political in nature. And I watched my county commissioner, and she was making some terrible decisions for the county. And I thought, wait, could I run for that? And then I started looking at the district and who the district had been voting for. And they were voting for Democrats on the top of the ticket, even though it was a majority Republican district. But we had that 1/3 nonpartisan in the district. And so I realized, a Democrat could win if they reach out to nonpartisans and let them know what they want to do. And homelessness had doubled in my community, and the county was refusing to deal with it. And so I ran on that. And so I think that I always tell kids when I go to universities or high school classes, just remember that life is not a straight arrow to what you think you're going to do. You're going to be on a path that is unpredictable, and you should be okay with that, like following what that looks like for your vision and your dreams.
And so, as the county commissioner, what have you been able to accomplish?
I am very proud of my work as a county commissioner because when I was elected, the region was at a crossroads of how are we going to handle a 1,400 person homeless population. And the city of Reno had really stepped up in councils before that to open a homeless shelter that was not adequate and not really serving the community by the time we got to COVID, or perhaps we just saw the real problems when COVID highlighted those for us. But so many people were losing their jobs, and these are working people that were ending up on the streets. So it was a real crisis. And I led the effort for the county to take over the continuum of care for the region because the county has the social workers, the county has that expertise. The county had already been taking care of women and children who were facing homelessness. So we already had some of that expertise of doing that work. And it took a leap of trust by Reno and Sparks to let go of the reins, let go of the funding, and allow that HUD funding to come to the county. And it has been a real success. There's so much more work to do, honestly. And that's part of the reason why I'm running for governor, because it's frustrating not having the resources to take care of vulnerable people. And we could be housing people if we'd had more resources, but we reduced homelessness on the street. We house about 68 people a month into permanent housing. It's not enough. We've got a lot of work to do because there's not enough housing. And sadly, landlords can discriminate if you have a housing voucher in our state. And there's all sorts of laws that make it really tough to get people housed. But I'm very proud of that work. And really, we've helped keep families together. We've helped get people on the right track. We've helped seniors who were dying in the shelter die with dignity and permanent supportive housing. So I would say that's one of the biggest things I'm very proud of. But it's half done. It's half done if you don't have the appropriate housing. We've also done a lot of work in mental health. We bought a closed down inpatient behavioral health center that was called West Hills, and now it's called Washoe County Behavioral Health. And we will be opening that next year. I'll have 92 beds for kids from ages 4 to 22. And it's a crisis of what's happening with our youth, that we're keeping them in hospitals, or you have to go out of state. And can you imagine if you have a job and going out of state to help your kid with a horrible crisis and that decision as a family? So we know that those beds will be filled immediately when we open that up, because we're going to bring in a private provider who will accept Medicaid. And that will be a game changer, but we'll be serving the entire state. So there's so much more work to be done in that space as well. But I'm really excited about that project and the leadership of the board coming together. And I just want to remind your listeners, my board is a 5-person board, 3 Republicans, 2 Democrats, and we're tackling homelessness. We're tackling mental health care. We're tackling really big issues for the region. We've done some incredibly progressive work on ensuring that the missing middle is built in Washoe County and allowing for ADUs and small homes and duplexes and single family and fourplexes and single family zoning. So we've done a lot of that. And I think that shows that you can actually get things done, which people are sick of with government. Government's not working for people these days, even with a bipartisan legislature, which is that county commission. So I think that has really shown me that we could be doing more on the state level if we could find what brings us together and what we actually have in common, and show that there's not only a human piece to policymaking, but there's also a financial piece of saving money, which is why some of the conservatives on my board are on board with this homeless services program.
And so when you say your board, you're talking about the Washoe County Commission board?
Yeah.
Okay. Just want to make sure that's clear for folks.
You're listening to
Sticky Note Conversations with Erika Washington.
Now, back to our conversation with Washoe County Commissioner Alexis Hill.
Staying on the subject of homelessness for a moment, it's something that I think about regularly. I feel like we've seen a lot of different policies put together, specifically in Las Vegas, where we have the no camping policy, no outside street camping or what have you, which is basically just a homeless policy, as well as some other things that I think prohibit people from finding places to sleep or eat or use the restroom or what have you, even though there aren't public places for them to do that. There are some shelters, but if you talk to some folks who are on the street, you talk to them about the shelters, which I have done just randomly in my free time. And some of the feedback that I have gotten is that they felt unsafe there, that they felt safer where they felt at home, for lack of a better term. And I don't feel like I've ever heard an elected official come up with an actual succinct plan of how to fix homelessness. Do you think that you might have an idea or thought around how we fix or alleviate homelessness?
Well, there actually are organizations who have been tackling this. Bill for Zero is a structure that we have been working on through the county under the nonprofit community services. And they received a MacArthur Genius Grant award a few years ago, because what they do and what the founder of this nonprofit learned when she was working in a shelter in New York was, we're obsessed with how many contacts the sheriff's office or the police office has with homeless. We're obsessed with how many contacts code enforcement or even through the court system. And we show we've done this many contacts with a homeless person. Instead of reporting out, we are working as a cohesive model in a region to get someone housed. And the real statistics you should be posting are how many people you're housing a month and how many people you're pulling out of homelessness into housing. That should be the goal, instead of how many people you get in contact with. And so when we rejiggered how we look at things, and actually we've got a committee that meets, a housing committee every week when a bed is open, and tries to find the best fit and the people who are most vulnerable that need that housing now. it has been very successful because we're not all working separately, we're working together. And I think that the next step of that community services is all about is actually getting permanent supportive housing online. This is for disabled folks, mentally ill folks. It's essentially the state and the federal government, really the federal government has said, we don't have to deal with these vulnerable people. We're going to release them to the street. And that was a long time ago. But now the counties and state are dealing with it. And I would say that the counties have not been given the right amount of resources or even oversight from the state to bring people together to follow these kind of models where you're really focusing on reducing your contacts with each homeless person so you can ensure that when you contact them, you know what they need, you put them in the system appropriately, and you find them that resource that they need to go to instead of 5 different organizations having contact with this person and not really doing anything with it because it's not a cohesive model. But in this complex environment in Clark County, when you have so many cities, you have a giant county, there needs to be more state support to bring everyone together to solve this. And I know that Mayor Shelley Berkeley talked about in her State of the City how this was something that she thought was more complex than she bargained for when she became mayor, and that it's a focus of the city. But I'm like, you can't do it alone, City of Las Vegas. Like, you cannot, especially with the sweeps that are moving people all over the city, everyone's got to work together because these people still need help and they need housing. That doesn't change. And the state needs to support communities who are following these models and incentivize them and get them grants to get people housed and get people staying housed.
So to round out what you said, or this is what I heard, I should say, homelessness is not an issue that can be fixed with just city government or even state government, but it does also require organizations that are specializing in alleviating homelessness and or finding housing for folks as well, working together. I would like to assume that also includes decriminalizing it, because I'm not sure how that helps. And wondering from the point of view of wanting to run an entire state that has multiple incarceration facilities, where some of these folks end up. What are your thoughts on how we keep the idea of not having enough money and a stable place to live or a roof over your head being the cause for incarceration?
Oh, it's horrifying. And listen, my county, we passed the same ordinance, and it's because of a lack of resources and people wanting to essentially have a carrot and stick, thinking that they can go after some of these folks. And some of them are there's criminal elements in every part of society. There's criminal elements in a homeless society. There's criminal elements in our, society of being in properly housed. So that's real too. But I think that in order for the state to make sure that all the communities are following the right model to get people the help that they need to provide local communities resources or resources and oversight. And also, I think it makes sense to prohibit criminalizing of homelessness on the state level so that counties can't do that. So I think that you put those two things together. I think that that's like where the success comes in, because the problem and the reason that compromise was made with criminalizing homelessness or no camping ordinances is because I had people on my board say, well, I don't want to support $20 million, $30 million a year from the county of a homeless program if we don't have a stick, if folks aren't following the rules. And it's tough when you're like, okay, I've got to get our budget passed. I've got to get proper funding for these programs. and making that compromise of, okay, this is something that a Republican board member wants to see. So I think that that's what our counties are dealing and cities are dealing with, is trying to put the resources in and show that there's great outcomes when they can't even get the last piece of the puzzle, which is the housing piece. And also having folks who are like, is this program working? We're not actually seeing the outcomes. And so fighting with both of those perspectives is tough. And I think that working with all of our counties to make sure that they have the resources they need to help people who are essentially seniors, that's most of these folks, 55 and up, disabled or mental illness, and only made worse by chronic homelessness. That's what's going on. Most of these people have worked in the system. They have, for whatever reason, didn't make enough money, had to drop out to take care of someone, had another experience where, they found themselves homeless. So I think that there's real opportunity for the state to provide those resources. Like right now in Washoe County, we are the homeless shelter for not only Northern Nevada, but for the state. We have folks who are coming from Clark County to come to our shelter. And again, we're happy to serve people. We want to serve people, but we don't have the resources to do it. And so I think that that's the balance of making sure that the state is involved. And I think that this hands-off approach that the state has had for my whole life, honestly, is not working. We're a modern economy. We are a global economy. And Clark County needs support and attention to actually deal with these a humane crisis as well as an economic crisis. Fighting poverty, I think that should be one of the number one things that the state works on, of preventing homelessness as well.
So, and speaking of fighting poverty, you said something a little bit earlier about the missing middle. I wanted you to expound on that a little bit. I hadn't actually heard that term before.
So missing middle housing is housing that meets people on the housing needs that they have. So we did the study of who is moving to Nevada, who is moving here, and how much room do they need. And the 4-person family is a rarity now. It doesn't exist. We have single parents and 2 kids, or we've got one person who's just moving here, who is not intending to live with anyone, or roommate situations. And so this 4-bedroom, 2-bath house that seems to be all that builders want to build, and it's because they've got a model and they've got that's their economic model for making sure they make the money to develop these subdivisions. That's actually not meeting what people need anymore. And so we have made it easier for developers to develop a fourplex, which it looks like a single family home on a 1/4 of an acre lot, but it has 4 different units in it, and allowing for actually things that people need to get built, and allowing for smaller developers. So someone who owns that property who are like, actually, I don't want to build a single family house there. I would rather build something that multiple people could live in and make more money as a landlord. Supporting that as well, instead of just supporting the big developers and what they think that they need to make the money. So we've incentivized higher densities, essentially, allowing for people to have smaller homes, because that's what people want now, and incentivizing that as a county. And we'll see how these suite of zoning ordinances go, and how if we're going to get what we want out of them. I think that there's also real opportunities, since so many counties and cities have land, to be in that competitive market with developers and develop our own products too. Same thing with what we've seen during the Great Recession of our housing authorities were able to buy up single family homes because they were going into receivership. And competing with other landlords. I think that would be healthy, to push landlords to actually compete with the government on what people can afford. But it's the housing essentially that is our service worker housing. So service workers make about 60% of area median income. They can't even get into a 1-bedroom apartment with what they make. It's multiple people in a property and having to move every year because the rent continues to increase. And so they've got to find another place that's going to provide that incentive, which is exhausting and really hard for working people. So I think that it's a balance of making sure that we're building the houses that people want and can afford, and that we're incentivizing landlords to do a better job of keeping people housed as well on the state level, which I've talked about rent caps as well. That's also helping the missing middle of making sure people can stay housed that live in apartments where you're seeing substantial rent increases without any stability for these folks.
So do you think we should have rent caps in the state?
Okay, so I am calling it a temporary rent cap because we're in a housing emergency. And anyone who says we're not in this state hasn't talked to someone who's working and trying to make it and working in a casino or working in the service industry around this state, which is the main employer and type of job that we have in this state. We could cap rents temporarily under that emergency order that the governor could do by executive order, and then working with the legislature to look long-term at housing stability and finding ways that we can work with landlords that they can continue to improve their properties, because I know I hear from mom and pop landlords who have anxiety about this, and I understand that too, but they're not the ones that are increasing rent necessarily 3 times, or by 3 with the next, lease for the tenant. So I think that it's making sure that they can increase it enough to improve the property, but that also we keep people stably housed. And I think that there's a balance, and we've seen other states actually do this quite effectively. And I think that Nevada's got to try it, because I don't know, don't we want to keep people housed instead of continue to grow our homeless population? Because that seems to be the priority of the way that we do business here.
I think that makes sense. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about campaigning. How has it been for you this is the first time you've campaigned for a statewide office. What has that experience been like for you?
I've loved it. I've missed my family, to be honest. That's been the hardest part. But I have a lot of support from my husband and my parents and the aunts and just an extended group of people supporting the family while I've been gone. A lot of FaceTime and phone calls, but connecting with new people throughout the state who want to see change, who believe in Nevada, but believe that Nevada needs a leader who actually wants to stand up for the working person and seniors on fixed incomes and kids who can't get permanent placement into homes. I think that's been really inspirational. I do so many events. I'm meeting people where they're at. I'm going to libraries. Yesterday, I had 2 library meet and greets, one on Social Security, another one on democracy. I did a healthcare roundtable the day before. And also we had a house party last night of just supporters coming together, getting excited about the possibility of winning this primary. And that's been really amazing as well. And so I've learned so much, I've grown so much, but I've never felt more proud of my state than being able to connect with people from all over. And I'm spending a lot of time in Clark County and in the Valley. I feel like I've made friends and also have a deeper understanding of how under-resourced this state is and how unacceptable it is that we've allowed it to get this bad, and how Clark County needs a lot of resources and attention from the state, and they're not getting it, and that's not okay.
So there is a current governor, and he's doing things. Whether people agree with the things he's done or not done, that's for, I think individual voters to decide. But as you look at the desire to run, why did you think you could do it better? Was there something in particular that wasn't being done or being done incompletely or what have you? Why you and why now?
Yes, great question. I just am so sick of going to the legislature and waiting for change and for everyone to wake up on the reality of what's happening on the ground in all of our communities. And I feel like this time is a time where Americans are standing up and asking for better from their government and asking for elected officials to actually map out how they're going to help people's lives. And I really worry that we have a governor who is doing everything he can to make Trump happy and putting Nevadans at risk, putting our economy at risk. And I actually think we can beat him if we outline to nonpartisans in the general election how we're going to make their lives better. Because I think that is what is missing from people running for office is they are, I get it. We got to fight Trump. They're obsessed with talking about Trump. And we also need to talk about the fundamental issues that are happening in our state today and how a governor can actually make real strides in supporting Nevadans and supporting our quality of life. And I am not seeing any vision from anyone on what that future looks like for our state. And I, in the same way that I started to look around when I worked at the city of Reno and Sparks and saw oh, these elected officials are humans and anyone can do it. I mean, it's scary to step forward and to decide to take on a new challenge like that, but it's also scary to think of whose hands it could be left in if you don't do it. And I'm motivated to bring change to my state because I see the problems every day and I'd like to fix them. And this is not a ego thing or an Alexis thing. It's I just want someone in there that's just going to make a few tweaks and modernize our state just a little bit and make it easier for people to live. And I'm just sick of people running on things that either can't be done or on ideological things instead of running on let's fix our state. Let's put Nevadans first. Let's figure out what's fundamentally wrong with this place. And our governor is bought and paid for. Honestly, he took over $1 million from one mining company. And that same company, we think, called him when they were upset about what the water engineer was doing and asking for legacy users to conserve and reduce their water usage. And he was fired. So that is just one of a million examples of how Joe Lombardo is exactly like Trump of firing committed public servants who are following the law because it doesn't work with his business associates who have supported him to be elected. And I think people are sick of that and want a change.
So what do you say to those who think that all politicians are bought and paid for?
Hey, it's fair. It's fair. I think that they understandably feel that way because how else do we run elections? Right now, it's, especially in Nevada, campaign finance is so loose. It's, we allow for bundling. We allow for you to give to me and your husband to give and your LLC to give. And before you know it, you could be giving me, $80,000 from a ton of different interests because you can max out at 10 grand. And so I think that campaign finance reform would help with that because right now you have to be pretty wealthy to run for office if you're not going to accept those kind of donations. And we're seeing that also potentially is like is that who's going to run for office? Are billionaires? We're seeing it in CD2 that some of the top candidates are billionaires. So I think that that is where people are not wrong in feeling that way and feeling discouraged. And I think campaign finance reform would be great, and even publicly funded elections. And I think that there's a lot of ways we could do that. We just have to increase revenues for our state, which is a priority of why I'm running, to tax billionaires and corporations so we can actually invest in our people. But I do think that democracy is in trouble unless we figure out this money piece, because people are disengaging. People are not showing up. We're even seeing that in this primary. And so I think that it's really important that we have someone who wants to focus on that issue.
So speaking of revenue, property tax, we talked a little bit about that before, and you thought that there were some ways in which we could fix that and help boost our revenue system. Talk to me about taxes, even though it's such a taboo sort of conversation, but there's a love-hate relationship with taxes. People like the idea of taxing the rich or having nice things, but not necessarily wanting to have taxes. So where do you stand and what does that look like for you?
Well, I'll tell folks, the working person in Nevada is already disproportionately paying higher taxes than the richest person in Nevada, because we have extremely high sales tax, we have extremely high gas tax, and our vehicle registration tax is where we increase that whenever we need money on the state level or for your counties as well. And because of that, we are also seeing reducing revenues, because sales tax used to cover more. We taken out things that we don't want to charge sales tax on, like tampons and pads, understandably, that we shouldn't, and diapers, So we're reducing that potential revenue stream that will come in. And also people are buying fewer products, like real products. Everything's being done virtually, and they are actually using more services. And so I think that we need to just look at how we can restructure and modernize our tax system. And one of the ways that you can do that is through taxing wealth. And taxing wealth includes property. And in this country, that is the way you accumulate wealth. And so I think that there is real opportunity to make sure that very wealthy people who are either investing in this state, which is happening, and not living here, are paying a higher portion of property tax than they are currently. Or people who are new to this community, we welcome you to Nevada, but you need to be paying your fair share on property tax. And because of the way that we structure our property tax, even very high value properties are not paying their fair share of property tax because of depreciating property tax. So I think that there's a way that we can make sure that people are paying their fair share, and that we are actually taxing wealth instead of continuing to tax the working poor, which is what we love to do in this state, because it's uncomfortable to have these conversations. But that is just one of many ways that we can increase revenues. And when I talk to people about it and these roundtables and throughout the community, they see that it is wrong what's happening in this state. And I think that the governor's job is to say, hey, this is what I'm running on. Here's how I'm going to bring people together at the legislative session to get this done, so we can actually pay for things like they paid family leave, like universal childcare, like not being 48 and per pupil funding for K through 12. We could try to get to the meaty part of the center there. Also bringing major industries to the table that haven't been paying their fair share and talking to them. And we've seen in the past, mining said, tax me in 2019. So we've seen industries come to the table before. Let's bring them to the table again. It's not going to all be done by one thing. It's going to be really having a full restructuring of the way that we look at the way that we tax people in Nevada. But I think that the timing is perfect, and the excitement by community members who want to see that change and want to see real investment. I think that there's the hopefully there will be the political will, but that's the governor's job to bring together those conversations. Like, we know right now we're losing about $1 billion a year that could go into our schools because of the corporate incentives that we give in this state. So we could look at restructuring those and having a negotiation with those folks. Like, why are we incentivizing Amazon, Walmart, and Tesla to be here when their employees are in the top 10 in Nevada of accepting Medicaid? So they're not even paying people properly. So we're subsidizing their employee healthcare. We're probably subsidizing their employees' housing in some way. And we're telling them, you don't have to pay personal property tax for a decade or 20 years. You don't have to pay sales tax or equipment tax. So there's so many opportunities, what I'm saying. And that's the governor's job, to bring the legislature together on finding those revenues. But I think the governor also needs to be strong and say, we can go into special session if we can't find the revenues. We've got to make sure K through 12, that budget is whole when we have those discussions. So I'm looking forward to it.
So thinking about special sessions and businesses coming in and looking for deals, which happens everywhere. The film tax. I know that wasn't necessarily something that was directly related to any work you were doing, as far as I understand, as county commission, but it's been a very big conversation, especially around this election, folks who voted for it versus those who voted against it. It did ultimately go to a special session and did not pass. What side are you on with the film tax credit? Did you see it as something that would be beneficial to Nevada to bring in these film studios into Nevada to bring in some industry and what have you? Or did you see maybe that the deal that was offered may not have been beneficial enough to those who live here?
Well, I think that it didn't pass for a reason. The governor's finance office said that we'd be looking at potentially up to a $500 million deficit by the time 2030 rolled around, because they were transferable tax credits that the casinos could use at any time to buy and offset their tax burden. So as far as sustainability, I think that we need to look at that first when we're looking at doing any of these deals. And because we don't have a way to give organizations who come to the state anything, because we are so low tax, we don't have any revenues like that, what we do is give it away. But that doesn't always work for us and hasn't been working for us for a while. And so I think that we can definitely have this negotiation with the film studios, but unless the legislature and the governor are willing to increase revenues in other ways and pay for things, we will continue to be in this cycle of boom and bust as a state. And I think that we can create a sustainable economy by investing in ourselves and our people and our communities, and also create excitement for companies to want to come here as well. And many of the quality of life indicators that the companies that we ideally would want to bring, aerospace, medical, they're looking at what are your schools like? How are your parks and your community spaces? And, can my kid walk to school? Is it safe on your roads? And so I think that that's where we're missing that piece of, it's an incredible place to live. I love Nevada, and every Nevadan I talk to loves living here, but they know that we could do better. And so I think that that's where, yes, let's talk about economic diversification, but I think it needs to be done sustainably. And I think we have to have a conversation that we just don't have a tax base where we can be giving away everything all the time. Right now, the governor's office of economic development, and there's less talk about this because it doesn't need to go to the legislature, but they are giving away millions of dollars monthly in their economic development committee meetings, bringing in these businesses right now without any legislative oversight, without any transparency, without any reporting. And so that also needs to be looked at, because we put all of these incentives in statutory guidelines, which puts that office in a tough place too, because sometimes they're having to give away tax incentives to something that we may not want in this state. And so I think that there's also needs to be a discussion of how we do that everyday business of economic development, but also the big packages as well, and making sure that they're working for the entire state.
Makes sense. So a question that I ask everyone, and you've mentioned democracy a couple times. How do you define democracy, and do we currently have it?
Great question. I would define democracy as a system that allows people to participate in the decision-making of their government systems. And I believe that we're at a crossroads with our democracy right now. Representative democracy is really suffering. And I think there's a lot of reasons for it. I think that we haven't done a great job of educating Americans, and certainly Nevadans, about why it's essential that they show up for voting, that they show up to community meetings, that they show up and engage in these spaces, and also that we as government officials are going out and talking to these people and engaging with them and meeting them where they're at as well. And so it's a two-way street. And I think that's why we're seeing some cracks in the foundation. I think that people don't want to participate because they see it as all being the same or corrupt, and that there won't be real change. And hey, we've done a good job of telling them they may be right, because we're not delivering in the way that we should. And really showing people that there's outcomes if you do actually engage and participate in your democracy. And I'm worried about the future of it. And in many ways, I see the Republicans as trying to ensure that we don't have an educated populace who will want to continue doing this. So they'll be willing to give it away in order to be able to afford groceries, or in order to not be taxed on their tips, or in order to feel like their jobs are being taken away. And that's really scary. And we saw that in Nevada when we voted for Trump for the first time as a state. And I think that's because of the desperation of people wanting results. Certainly racism played into that too. But I think that when you've got someone telling you that your grocery prices will be lower on day one, that you can afford eggs, that you can afford to live in your community, that you want to say, okay, let's rip up the system and start all over. And I think a lot of people, that's a lot of the thought process that went into voting for Trump. So, and we didn't have people show up also in that election. We had abysmal turnout. So I think that there's a lot of work to be done, and it's on elected officials to get shit done for people, but it's also on our systems to make sure people are prepared to participate in that way.
You know, I think Nevada can be labeled as a purple state, or, you know, it's been labeled blue-ish, mostly purple. You know, at one point we had a pretty heavy Democratic legislative body, very woman-led legislative body. But then we've also had the state turn red for Trump in the last election as well. And there are certain congressional seats that flip-flop back and forth, you know, over time, sometimes every cycle or close to it. So it shows that there's diversity in thought and diversity in party. And thinking about that, in Las Vegas, sometimes Nevada as a whole has been called the Mississippi of the West, and not meaning it in a complimentary way. And there are still what people will call sundown towns in Nevada. And those are some things that I think outsiders may not realize or even think about because of where Nevada is located. So, people have an assumption that racism lives in one part of the country and not in the entirety, or the conceptions of race or superiority or what have you lives in certain areas and not in others. How do you see bridging those gaps and bringing folks together in a meaningful way that is not just, I'm right, you're wrong, but actual conversation? What does that look like through the lens of governmental leadership?
Well, like I was saying about the state being disconnected from what is happening on the county level, and I could easily say that as a county commissioner, trying to battle these major issues without state support and really trying to find our own solutions and our own way. Those same counties are doing some questionable things with their laws, and they're not being monitored, or there's no oversight. And I think that what really excites me about moving into this position and being Nevada's next governor is the governing part of it. And the governing part of it isn't always even the legislature, although that's a huge part. It's also the soft power that a governor has to engage with all 17 counties on what we need to see as a state and how we're going to come together and solve those issues. And having staff that are participating in county commission meetings that are from the governor's office, having staff that are engaging with their transportation boards and their homeless advisors.
Does that happen now?
No, this is my vision.
Okay.
This is my vision.
Okay. Because I was like, I've never seen that. So this is your vision. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. And I think having a governor's office that also represents Nevada, having a governor's office with more than 2 staff who live in Clark County, who are engaging in the issues in the cities and the county every day. And that's their job, is to be reps for the state to see what's happening. And so we can have those conversations, because that's what's really missing. Is I feel a total disconnect between the state and what they expect the counties to do and then what the counties are actually doing. That's part of my elections plan too, about, okay, I'm saying that we need additional resources in the clerk's office and the registrar of voters office to conduct these elections. But not only do we need the bigger offices to ensure we have enough room to process these mail-in ballots and all of those kind of resources, but we need oversight on these counties, because we had a county who hand counted ballots last election season. And so this is where I think the state is missing the mark about making sure that we're keeping our counties accountable and that they're doing what they need to be doing. And the state is barely providing the social safety net that these counties need, because that's really what the state's function is. If you're not Clark or Washoe, the state's filling in that social safety net, but we're barely even doing it today. And so I think that it's also just making sure that we know the issues on the ground and can use policy and funding incentives to say, counties, if you want support from the state on getting housing built, for example, which is a huge problem in our rural counties as well, huge problem, then you need to also make sure that you have a functional government that is not excluding people of color, that you're not arresting community members, that we actually make sure that what Trump is trying to do with ICE in Nevada, and our governor is complicit as part of it, that is reversed, that we actually hold the federal government accountable and make the federal government follow the laws that we have in place for warrants and just essential things like that, and protecting our communities of color. But you're not going to know that it's happening unless you're participating and engaging. And that's not happening. So there's a lot of leadership that is missing and on the state level. And I think that there is a lot of opportunity to fight racism on the state level by showing up and finding out what's going on, and also having staff that represent all of the all of the state, regionally, racially, with gender as well, to make sure that we've got people in positions of power that are fighting for communities.
And so another question that I ask everyone on this podcast, what is your version of the American dream?
When my grandparents came to Nevada, they came here because they could buy a house. They lived in Arizona in a tent. My grandma had just had my uncle and my dad twins, and they needed to find a place where they could be stably housed. And Ely, Nevada, you could be a driller, which my grandpa was, and he drilled for mines as well as wells, and you could buy a house. And my grandma worked in the laundromat, and they were able to find a way for my dad and my uncle to go to community college, and eventually they went to law school and were able to set up small businesses in Reno, Nevada, and also able to, my dad run for office, but buy homes and have successful families. And I'm not saying that buying a home is essential to the American dream, but it is a way that we can easily accumulate wealth in this country. And I think that there still in Nevada, there is opportunities for us to make sure that people, if they want that we can help them with that. And supporting people to be educated or trained in the way that they need to be trained. And making sure that people have enough money to live a comfortable life, and that they don't have to have 3 jobs to do it. And I think that there is a way we can do that in this state and really make sure that we, again, invest in ending poverty, because that will support our social safety net so much more than kids being removed from homes and people going to jail and being hospitalized, and making sure that the state is creating opportunity for all communities in the state to be successful. That's how I think of that as the Nevada dream, because so many people come here to work hard. People are not looking there. No one's coming to Nevada for a handout, because there are no handouts here. They're coming here to work a lot and to build a lot of people are building small businesses here. People are forging, pathways of opportunity for their families and their communities. And we just need to make it a little easier for people to find opportunity in this state. And I think that we will see that people can have that American dream. And I think that makes me really excited about what could happen in our state, is if we actually decided to take control and stand up for working families and provide those opportunities and make it a little easier for them to have that Nevada dream.
And so my final question before we go, answer this. If I am Nevada's next governor, I will, or I plan to. Fill in the blank.
I love it. If I'm Nevada's next governor, I plan to invest in Nevadans and put Nevadans first. And I want to tax billionaires and corporations. And I want to invest in our essential services. I want to invest in our healthcare services. I want to invest in our seniors and our kids and our working families. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity to provide opportunities to Nevadans, and they will pay it forward times 10. And we will see real economic growth and prosperity in this state if we give people a little bit more opportunity and a little bit more investment. And that's what I plan to do as Nevada's next governor.
Well, thank you, Alexis Hill, for joining me on Sticky Note Conversations. It's been an enjoyable conversation. I've learned so much. I think listeners also have learned a lot about you. And so hopefully everyone gets an opportunity to listen. And then if they want to directly engage with you, they would find you where?
At Alexis for Nevada on all social media platforms, on my website, except for X. but I'm on the rest of them.
Gotcha. I'm not on X either. Well, folks, thank you again for listening to Sticky Note Conversations. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as we did. Until next time.
Thanks for listening to Sticky Note Conversations with Erika Washington. Hosted and executively produced by Erika Washington. With editing by Black Gypsy LLC. Special thanks to KUNV 91.5 in Las Vegas. This show is powered by Make It Work Nevada, a project of Tides Advocacy.